The first day of September 1939 became a fateful turning point in human history, a moment when the world, holding its breath, watched the beginning of a global catastrophe. Nazi Germany, driven by ambition and the ideology of supremacy, unleashed the full power of its war machine upon the Polish borders, igniting the bloodiest conflict of all time, World War II. No sooner had the cannonade of the first battles died down and the Polish defenses been broken, than a new, quiet, yet no less terrifying war began in the occupied territories. The German command initiated a monstrous plan for the systematic extermination of the Polish people, whom Nazi racial theory had declared inferior and subject to eradication. The punitive machine shifted into full gear. Special SS death squads, Einsatzgruppen*, reinforced by police battalions and regular army units, began a methodical hunt for people. Thousands of civilians were executed daily, and the choice of victims was far from random. The target was the cream of the nation, hereditary nobility, clergy, and representatives of the creative and scientific intelligentsia, all those who possessed the authority and strength of spirit to lead a resistance or preserve national identity. The occupiers' design was crystal clear and cynical: to wipe Polish culture off the face of the earth, turn the survivors into a submissive labor force, and make the territory of Poland a giant graveyard for European Jewry. Before we delve into the grim details of this history, we remind you that this material was prepared by the channel Military History. Here, we weekly uncover pages of the past often omitted by school textbooks, so we strongly recommend subscribing to updates and activating notifications so as not to miss new investigations into the darkest chapters of the war. Events unfolded with frightening rapidity. Just 24 hours after the invasion began, on September 2, 1939, the Nazi administration established its first concentration camp outside the Reich. The location was chosen with diabolical calculation: a remote, swampy woodland near the inconspicuous village of Stutthof, located about 22 miles east of Danzig. The isolation and harsh landscape made this place ideal for concealing crimes, and soon the name Stutthof became a synonym for inhuman suffering and hopelessness. The history of this camp is inextricably linked with the names of its executioners, among whom a young woman named Wanda Barkmann gained a particular, sinister fame. Her image remained in the memory of survivors as one woven of contradictions. For her incredible physical beauty combined with icy cruelty, the prisoners nicknamed her the Beautiful Spectre. The life of this woman began on May 30th, 1922, in Hamburg. She was born during the turbulent twilight of the Weimar Republic, as Germany plunged into chaos. The Barkmann family lived on the brink of poverty. Her father exhausted himself with hard labor in the docks, while her mother waged an endless struggle for survival, trying to provide at least a minimal livelihood. In early childhood, Jenny was no different from her peers. She was a completely ordinary girl who spent hours playing with dolls and, looking at magazine pages, dreamed of a brilliant career as a film actress or fashion model. It seemed nothing foreshadowed trouble, but everything changed when she turned 10. January 1933 became a turning point. Adolf Hitler and his party seized absolute power in the country. From that moment, a total recoding of the nation's consciousness began. Joseph Goebbels, the evil genius of Nazi propaganda, quickly built a suffocating cult of personality around the Führer, and the poisonous ideology penetrated every cell of German society. The information space was completely subordinated to the new masters. Newspapers, radio broadcasts, cinema, and even urban architecture became instruments for imposing Hitler's perverted worldview. Streets were named after him, portraits of the leader hung in every classroom and institution, and citizens were obliged to greet each other with a raised arm. The regime paid special attention to the younger generation. German children became the object of massive ideological indoctrination. From the first school bell, young minds were poisoned with ideas of racial superiority, militarism, fanatical worship of authority, and animalistic hatred toward Jews. Wanda Barkmann, raised in the traditions of the evangelical church, absorbed this toxic atmosphere fully during her formative years. After finishing elementary school, she took a job at a confectionery, but seeds of cruelty had already sprouted behind the facade of an ordinary life. In September 1939, while 17-year-old Jenny was packing sweets in Hamburg, the first fences of Stutthof were already being erected in a distant Polish forest. In the initial stage, the camp was a modest complex of 8 wooden barracks, which were surrounded by barbed wire in 1940 by the hands of the first prisoners themselves. Initially, the institution had the status of a civilian internment camp and was under the jurisdiction of the Danzig police, but its true purpose was far more terrible than simple imprisonment. Stutthof was created as a tool for cleansing the Polish land of its best representatives, intellectuals, patriots, and spiritual leaders. The Nazis had compiled lists of those who were to perish in these swamps even before the first shot of the war was fired. The evolution of the camp followed a path of tightening control and expansion. In November 1941, it received the status of a labor education camp under the control of the SD Security Service, and by January 1942, it had turned into a full-fledged concentration camp within the SS system. The year 1943 was marked by massive construction. 30 new barracks rose up, and the perimeter was reinforced with an electrified fence that dealt death to anyone who touched it. The appearance of a crematorium and a gas chamber happened just in time to integrate Stutthof into the monstrous conveyor belt of the final solution to the Jewish question in June 1944. The capacity of the gas chamber allowed for the destruction of up to 150 human lives in a single cycle. Over time, Stutthof turned into a vast empire of death, spreading its tentacles in the form of 105 subcamps throughout the northern and central parts of the occupied territories. About 100,000 people passed through its gates. The majority were Poles, but later trains began bringing Polish Jews from Warsaw and Białystok, as well as prisoners from Baltic camps whom the Nazis were evacuating under the pressure of Soviet troops. The conditions of existence inside the perimeter were beyond human understanding. In the winter of 1942 and again in 1944, the camp was mowed down by typhus epidemics, claiming thousands of lives in agony and fever. Those who were too weak or sick for exhausting slave labor were sent by selection straight to the gas chambers. Beginning in the summer of 1944, the poisonous gas Zyklon B ended the lives of 4,000 prisoners even before the evacuation began. Camp doctors, violating the Hippocratic Oath, practiced killing the sick and wounded by injecting phenol directly into the heart. In total, more than 60,000 human beings were destroyed within the walls of Stutthof. January 1944 arrived. 21-year-old Wanda Barkmann made a decision that definitively sealed her fate. She voluntarily joined the ranks of the SS to become an overseer, Officerin*, in the SK3 women's subcamp. There is information that by that time she was already a single mother, having given birth to a child by a German soldier, and had left the child in the care of her mother in Hamburg. During an intensive 10-day training course, SS instructors methodically purged the recruits of any remaining humanity. The captain leading the training instilled in the future overseers that pity is a vice, and prisoners are not people, but merely expendable material, slaves to be treated however one pleased. Barkmann likely hoped that the service would be a springboard for a career where her beauty would be duly appreciated. However, her striking appearance combined with pathological sadism spawned a monster. Prisoners nicknamed her Mad Jenny with horror. She reveled in power, beating people, including defenseless children, with whatever came to hand, whips, sticks, and often just her fists. Many victims died right under her blows. She personally conducted the selection of women and children for the gas chambers, separating families with cold calculation and sending people to their deaths. She derived special pleasure from prolonged torture. Later, during the investigation, she recounted with blood-curdling calm how she and her SS colleagues organized roll calls lasting many hours in the freezing cold. The goal was simple and terrible: to force exhausted women, dressed in rags, to freeze to death. Barkmann admitted that many indeed died of hypothermia, while the guards, dressed in warm fur coats and greatcoats, enjoyed their superiority. Survivor testimonies paint a picture of absolute evil. Maria Zenberg recalled how Barkmann burst into the showers and beat defenseless naked women. Another prisoner, Sika, told the story of how she once dared to ask permission to pick up a potato from the floor. Barkmann, who had the day off, struck the woman in the face instead of answering, and smashed her head open with a stick. A similar fate befell the narrator's friend, who paid with her life for attempting to take a potato from the cellar. She died the next day after the beating. There were hundreds of such stories. Even mass death did not touch Barkmann's heart. At the height of the typhus epidemic in late 1944, when the disease was killing 1 in 10, she merely recorded the statistics. According to her, at first up to 40 people died a day, but then there were so many corpses that the crematorium choked, and bodies had to be burned on giant pyres under the open sky. In January 1945, when the rumble of Soviet artillery became increasingly audible, the chaotic evacuation of the camp began. This became the final act of the Stutthof tragedy. About 50,000 prisoners found themselves in a deadly trap. 5,000 people were driven on a march to the Baltic Sea, where they were forced into the icy waves and gunned down by crossfire from machine guns. Other columns of prisoners were directed west, towards Lauenburg, but the rapid advance of the Red Army cut off retreat routes. The Germans turned the columns back. This journey was named the Death March. Thousands of exhausted people fell into the snow and died of cold, hunger, and the bullets of the escorts. In late April, when the encirclement closed, they attempted to evacuate the remaining prisoners by sea, and again hundreds were ruthlessly killed. The statistics are horrifying. Every second prisoner sent on the evacuation died in these final days of the war. When Soviet soldiers entered Stutthof on May 9, 1945, they were met with silence and only about 100 survivors who had managed to hide in the barracks. Barkmann herself had left the camp back in January, trying to get lost in the chaos of retreating Germany. She hid for 4 months, but justice caught up with her in May at a train station in Danzig, where she was arrested by the Polish militia. At the initial interrogations, Jenny tried to play the role of an innocent victim. She lied brazenly, claiming she had always sympathized with Jews, never raised a hand against prisoners, and even saved them from death at the risk of her own life. But this legend crumbled to dust as soon as she was presented with the testimonies of dozens of surviving witnesses. The first Stutthof trial, which began on April 25, 1946, became the stage where the full depth of her moral depravity was revealed. Barkmann's behavior in court shocked those present. It seemed she was completely unconcerned by the gravity of the charges or the prospect of the death penalty. All her attention was focused on her own appearance. She changed her hairstyles daily, carefully chose her outfits, and shamelessly flirted with the guards. Together with other female defendants, she giggled, exchanged jokes, and demonstrated contempt for the court with her entire demeanor. Even her lawyer, realizing the hopelessness of the situation, tried to build a defense on the version of a mental disorder, arguing that a healthy person was simply incapable of such atrocities. On May 31, 1946, the court delivered its verdict. 11 executioners, including 5 women, were found guilty of crimes against humanity and sentenced to death by hanging. At the moment the sentence was announced, almost everyone's nerves gave way. Wanda Klaff, Gerda Steinhoff, and others sobbed and begged for mercy. Only Wanda Barkmann, who had turned 24 the day before, stood with a stone face. She did not shed a single tear, nor did she express a drop of remorse. Her final phrase, thrown with cynical arrogance, was, "Life is indeed a pleasure, and pleasures are usually short-lived." The execution took place on July 4, 1946. The setting was Biskupia Górka, Bishop's Hill, near Gdańsk. It was a warm, sunny summer day. By 5 p.m., a convoy of 11 trucks approached the execution site. In the back of each stood a condemned person with bound hands and feet. An unimaginable crowd, 200,000 people, gathered to witness this act of retribution. People thirsted for justice. Newspapers had announced the date in advance, and businesses provided workers with time off and transport so that everyone who wished could attend. The tension in the air was so thick it could be cut with a knife. The guards and militia struggled to hold back the sea of people, fearing the crowd would break through the cordons and lynch the prisoners. The trucks reversed under specially erected gallows. The condemned were forced to stand on the truck beds or on chairs. The role of executioners was voluntarily taken by former Stutthof prisoners, dressed in their striped camp uniforms. It was they who placed the nooses around the necks of their tormentors. The method of execution chosen was harsh. It was not the classic hanging with a drop from a height that breaks the neck and brings instant death. The trucks slowly drove away, and the condemned were left hanging in the air, dying of strangulation. This agony lasted from 10 to 20 minutes. The first to be executed was the commandant of the guards, Johann Pauls. As the vehicle began to move, he managed to shout the Nazi salute, to which the crowd responded with an explosion of rage and curses. His body went into convulsions, performing a macabre dance of death. The trucks drove off one by one. Those waiting in line saw the torment of their accomplices and understood what awaited them in a minute. There was also a technical failure. The engine of one of the vehicles stalled, and a former prisoner simply pushed the female overseer off the platform with his hands. The crowd rejoiced. People shouted, dedicating the death of the Nazis to the memory of their murdered children and husbands. When it was all over and the bodies fell silent, the cordon was lifted. People rushed to the gallows. In a fit of hatred, they tore buttons from the hanged men's clothes as souvenirs, cut off pieces of fabric, kicked, and trampled the corpses. This spectacle also had dark psychological consequences. Children who witnessed the execution later reproduced what they had seen in their games, hanging dolls, and sometimes tragedies occurred where living children ended up in the noose. Contrary to widespread rumors that Barkmann's ashes were scattered or humiliatingly destroyed, reality proved more prosaic and scientific. The bodies of all 11 executed were transferred to the anatomy theater of the Medical University in Gdańsk, where they served as material for training students. Such was the inglorious end of the beautiful Spectre. No one in the world shed a tear for her. If this story made an impression on you, the Military History Channel is ready to open dozens of other forgotten pages of the past for you. Support our work with a like, share this story with friends, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to explore with us the events that shaped the modern world. We await your comments. Write which historical episode you would like to learn about next time. Remember, knowing the horrors of history is the best inoculation against their repetition.